Pakistan is one of the fifth most vulnerable countries to the issue of climate change, which means that we are experiencing very different sort of scenarios all across the country, all the way from the north where we have, for example, glaciers that are melting and creating lakes and flooding there and landslides, to flooding here in the lower part of Sindh, and also desertification. So these are things that we have to understand with the increases in climate and temperatures, that people are being affected in different ways. Rural areas are being affected differently. Urban areas are being affected differently. There's a lot of climate migration that is happening. What is also important to understand is there are already existing inequalities in our country. And what climate change does is that it exacerbates those existing inequalities. And so in our undergraduate curriculum in Pakistan, unfortunately, there's a huge gap. People don't talk about these issues and how they are interconnected. So we have to bring the issues into our curriculum and in a way that makes sense to see the intersection of how they are coming together. As a researcher, it's really important to understand issues in a very systematic way, in a way that's informed through curiosity, through evidence, so that when we try and address an issue or a problem, we have solid data to back what we're doing. When you look at an issue from multiple perspectives, the cultural aspect of it, the technical aspect of it, the geographical aspect of it, the aspect of human rights, how do these come together? And research allows for that to happen. So when students are exposed to that type of learning and that type of education, it's only then that they're able to come up with solutions that are contextual, that work for the country itself. And so when we bring students into the research sphere, they begin to look at the world and how we look at solutions very differently. And that's why student-centered research becomes so important at the undergraduate level.
At Habib University and its Office of Research, we have certain research pillars. And this project really aligned with those pillars. The first pillar is undergraduate research culture. So we really want to include our students in meaningful research projects. The second is solving problems of today and tomorrow and of regional importance. The third is that we can convert courses and researches into pedagogical deliverables. And this opportunity from USIP really fitted the bill for what we really wanted to do.
So when I started this course, I was a bit skeptical on how academically all of these three things had a nexus. About my own research, it was based on understanding and exploring gender performativity post-flood rehabilitation from the perspective of relief workers in Pakistan. I wanted to pursue a research topic along the lines of what happens after the disaster happens and how are people impacted after it. An interesting finding about the nexus that I personally found was that there were several cases where the gender roles were changing. Some women told how when the floods were coming, they used to put their daughters on the forefront, or they chose themselves to get on the forefront, even though as women they weren't as much expected to do that. And this was a change of gender role, that the women were going at the forefront at the time of flood. But this was because of the fact that they considered their sons or their husbands to be a better asset for the family. So if there was some damage being done, it should be on daughters or on the wives, because they were not as useful or as valuable assets as the men were.
Students also were very sensitive about the cultural perspective of how climate change is affecting very specific communities.
So my research was about the Kalasha community. Since we were working at the nexus of gender, climate change and security, I chose the Kalasha community because I think a week earlier when the classes were commencing, there was a terrorist attack in their region. Because the Kalasha valleys are closely connected to the Durand border that separates Afghanistan from Chitral. And I was searching about that attack on Google, and surprisingly the search returned with images of exoticized Kalasha women. That was my point of entry into this research question. But since Kalasha villages are also one of the most affected regions due to climate change, and there was a question of gender also, so I thought of exploring this issue further. So I did a critical discourse analysis of the tourism websites who are offering package tours to the Kalasha region. and just to find out how their discourses is built, how they are trying to represent the people, and how these representation are masking the real challenges the people face due to climate change. This class was also about decolonial approaches, like how we can integrate decolonial approaches into our practices and even in theory. So I had to really look into myself, what are my assumptions, and keeping them aside. After taking this course, I realized that climate change is also a social and political and is also a philosophical issue when we go out and when we interact with these peoples.
So if you look at it, the breadth of the type of research that we did in this course very much connects with Habib University's sort of vision and understanding of deconstructing research to look at it from a very much a decolonial lens, where we are looking at how communities are exploited, but also how are we addressing that type of exploitation.
After the course, we also felt that we need to have a platform where we can disseminate the findings of these research, but also create a platform for capacity building and research skills. And therefore this conference was organized.
Every activity that we were thinking of, we would think, okay, would the students enjoy this? Would this be something that could add to the students' skill set or their portfolios? And would this be something that the students could actually participate in? And we also wanted to make sure that we were not just focusing on research papers, but we could also expand conversations around climate, gender, and peace to include other mediums such as art and film.
Pakistan is one of the most affected countries by climate change. And climate change really exacerbates gender inequalities and other inequalities that already exist in a society. So a conference that brings those two things together, that allows students and activists and researchers to study that interconnection. I think the most important aspect of this is you are reaching out to young people, students and others, because they're the ones who are going to come out of this and come out of their education and really take on the challenges for the next 20 or 30 years. And this is a challenge that we need to face across all elements of society. And it's the students and young people who are going to make the changes that are needed.
One of the big utility of events such as this conference is that it brings together practitioners from different industries, forces them out of their own silos to collaborate, to think about solutions of a problem from different angles.
The Mangroves trip was an add-on to the conference, and it really wrapped up the entire conference experience by taking our conference attendees and our students on an immersive experience to the coastal regions in Karachi, and to sort of engage in one-on-one conversation with the communities that reside over there to understand what are the challenges they're actually facing due to climate change.
So the third piece was really to take students out to the field, and so it became a 3-day conference because it became not only to have an academic and a cerebral experience, but an embodied experience as well. And I think that is what holistic education is about.
Aamozish Tehqeeq demonstrates, it validates that meaningful and impactful undergraduate research is possible within the realm of a 16-week course, has the agency through teaching and learning that it can galvanize and bring together a community of students and scholars that can debate and reflect around critical issues.